Hi, my name is Dr. Kay, and in this presentation we are going to talk about how to write the instrument section in Chapter 3 of your dissertation, capstone, or research study. Here's what we will cover in this video. First, we will go over the purpose of the instrument section and why it matters in Chapter 3. Then, we will look at how to write about qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods instruments. After that, we will go over important guidelines to follow when writing this section, and I will point out some common mistakes to avoid. And finally, we will conclude with key takeaways to help you write a clear and effective instrument section. The instrument section serves several important purposes. Most importantly, this section explains to the readers what tools you use to collect your data and why you chose them. You should explain not just the name of the instrument, but also its role in your study. You should also describe how the instrument was used and why it was the right choice for your study. Another goal is to show how the instrument aligns with your research questions and overall design so the reader can see the connection clearly. And finally, this section needs to include enough detail that another researcher could replicate your study while still keeping the description focused and concise. When writing this section, you should first identify the type of instrument you used and its purpose. Then, explain how the instrument was developed or obtained, whether it was adapted from existing tools, already validated, or created by you. If you piloted or tested the instrument, briefly describe that process. Be sure to explain how the instrument connects to your study, whether that includes the variables in quantitative design or the constructs in a qualitative study. And finally, show the alignment between your instrument and your research questions, which is often done through an alignment table. Now let's take a look at quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods instruments and how each should be explained in Chapter 3. In qualitative research, instruments often include interview protocols, focus group guides, or document analysis rubrics. Qualitative instruments are built using open-ended questions designed to elicit detailed responses that speak directly to your research questions. They're usually built on the literature and on your theoretical framework if your study has one. And remember, qualitative instruments are often semi-structured, which means you have guiding questions but still leave room for follow-up prompts and emerging themes. In quantitative studies, instruments are usually surveys, standardized tests, or existing scales. These are developed using closed-ended questions such as multiple choice or Likert scales. And remember, the correct pronunciation is Likert, not Likert. Quantitative instruments measure your study's variables. The instrument might be something you adopt from another researcher, adopt from an existing tool, or create yourself. No matter which option you choose, you need to clearly show how your instrument connects to the variables in your study and to your research questions. In mixed method studies, it is important to separate your discussion of instruments by strand, qualitative and quantitative. Describe the quantitative instrument on its own and the qualitative instrument on its own. Explain each instrument in the order you actually use them in your study. Then, show how they complement each other, how the survey and interviews, for example, approach the same construct from different perspectives. And don't forget, for each, you should still apply the same guidelines we covered on previous slides. Over the next few slides, we will cover best practices for writing this section of Chapter 3 and highlight common mistakes to avoid. Describing your instrument is one of the central aspects of this section. When explaining your instrument, focus on giving the reader a clear and structured overview by mentioning the type of instrument, its purpose, and how many items or questions it includes. If your instrument has multiple sections, explain what each section covers and how it ties to your research questions. The key is balance. Provide enough information that someone could replicate your study, but don't overwhelm the reader by listing every single item. Instead, include your full instrument in the appendix and refer your reader to that section for a full list of items. Here are a few common mistakes to avoid. One is just naming the instrument without saying anything about where it came from, who developed it, or why you used it. Another is failing to show how the instrument actually addresses your research questions. A third is going too far in the other direction and listing every single survey item in Chapter 3. And finally, a big one is what we call a circular definition, where you say things like the interview questions were designed to answer the research questions, without explaining how they were designed or how they accomplished this objective. Here are a few examples of weak explanations. For a qualitative study, a researcher may say that interview questions were developed to answer the research questions on students' experiences with study abroad. Or for a quantitative study, they might say that a survey was used to measure student engagement. And in a mixed method study, they might write that both a survey and interviews were used to explore student experiences and measure their engagement. What all these examples have in common is that they simply restate the research questions and overall study purpose, instead of showing how the instruments were designed to answer these questions or accomplish this purpose. To sum up, the instrument section should cover what you used, why you chose it, how it was developed, and how it connects back to your research questions. Provide enough detail for replication, but save the full instrument in the appendix. Avoid vague and circular statements and instead explain how the instrument met its intended purposes. And finally, make sure your section is organized clearly, whether by instrument type, methodology, or chronological order. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope it helps you approach the instrument section with confidence as you write your Chapter 3.